They came to an empty throne. Commander Eva Rostova stood on the bridge of the survey vessel Stellograph, a place that felt more like a library than a cockpit. Her command was an anomaly, a historian given a ship to chart the quiet dust of forgotten systems. The Tartarus anomaly, however, was not quiet. It was a void within a void, a patch of space so profoundly black it felt like a hole punched through reality itself. At its heart floated the reason for their journey, a monolithic object that defied every known law of physics. It was a ghost of impossible scale, shaped like a clasped hand, its sleeping arrays tracing lines of forgotten geometry against the nothingness. The ship's primary AI pathfinder spoke in the calm, synthesized tones of a machine that had never known doubt. Analysis remains unchanged, Commander. The object is approximately 9 kilometers in length. It emits no detectable energy, reflects no radiation, and possesses a gravitational signature inconsistent with its apparent mass. Rostova watched the main display where the artifact was rendered in wireframe against a starless background. They called it the Obsidian Anchorage. All that touched it simply vanished. The name felt inadequate, a label for a wound in the cosmos. Her tactical officer, Jax, shifted his weight, the sound of his mag boots, a sharp clap, in the otherwise silent bridge. It's a stealth platform. Pre-collapse, maybe. First ancestor tech. His voice was a low rumble of certainty, a stark contrast to Rostova's academic caution. The ascendancy will be here within the cycle. They'll want it, Commander. We need to claim it or leave. Rostova felt a familiar tension coil in her gut. She was here to record, not to claim. The sigil etched into the anchorage's central mass, a circle bisected by a vertical line with 3 dots to its left, was a symbol she'd only seen in fragmented third-hand accounts of humanity's expansion. This was a relic from the age of saints and monsters, when mankind first strode between the stars. It was a piece of a story no one remembered how to read. A debt the universe had forgotten. She could feel a low sub-harmonic hum through the deck plates, a vibration so faint it was more a feeling than a sound. It was the resonance of something impossibly old, sleeping a fitful, dreamless sleep. Maintain our position, Jax. Anaya, keep the deep core sensors focused on that sigil. I want to know if its composition differs from the rest of the hull. Her engineer's voice, clear and precise, answered from her console. Aye, Commander. It's like trying to scan a shadow, but I'll see what I can coax out of it. Pathfinder's synthesized voice cut through the low thrum of the bridge. Commander, long-range tachyon sensors have detected an energy spike consistent with a fleet translation. Multiple signatures, ascendancy configuration. Estimated arrival 74 minutes. Jack swore under his breath, a sharp, bitter sound. Legalists. They'll wrap this place in so much red tape it'll suffocate. Rostova gripped the cool metal of her command chair. The ascendancy governed 3 sectors with a doctrine of rigid control, viewing any advanced unclaimed technology as an inherent threat to stability. They did not discover. They contained. They haven't seen it yet, Jax, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. They're responding to our initial report of the anomaly. Their protocols demand a heavy response. Her mind raced through the possibilities, each one ending in the quiet suppression of the greatest historical find in a millennium. Pathfinder. What is the probability that the ascendancy will permit a non-military archaeological survey to continue upon their arrival? The AI's avatar, a simple pulsating sphere of light, flickered. Less than 0.1%, Commander. The hum from the deck plates seemed to intensify, a deep, resonant tone that vibrated in her bones. The anchorage did not reflect. It erased. A civilian freighter, the Star Treader, moved sluggishly through a trade lane 2 systems away from Tartarus. Its captain, a grizzled man named Wren, watched the official news feed flicker on a secondary screen. Another anomaly, he grumbled to his co-pilot, a young woman with wide, curious eyes. Ascendancy fleet's already moving to cordon it off. She pointed a slim finger at the screen. They say it might be a first ancestor artifact. Ren snorted, taking a sip of his nutrient paste. That's what they always say. Means another decade of trade restrictions and military patrols. Means more trouble for people like us. He looked out at the endless river of stars. I just wish for once they'd find something that didn't make them afraid. Rostova watched the Ascendancy fleet resolve on the main screen. 3 cruisers and a dozen smaller frigates, their forms stark and brutalist. They were ships built for intimidation, not exploration. Their lead vessel, the Immutable Truth, hailed them. A face appeared on the comms panel, stern and etched with the unwavering certainty of a zealot. It was Proctor Valerius, a man known for his rigid adherence to Ascendancy doctrine. Survey vessel stellograph, he began, his voice devoid of warmth. You are ordered to transmit all your sensor data and retreat to a minimum safe distance of 100,000 kilometers. This anomaly is now under Ascendancy quarantine. History is a weapon waiting for a hand. Rostova felt a surge of defiance, a scholar's instinct to protect a priceless text from those who would burn it. Proctor Valerius, this is Commander Rostova. We are a civilian research vessel operating under a duly filed exploration mandate. We have established a stable observation orbit and pose no threat. Valerius's eyes narrowed. Your mandate is irrelevant. Unidentified and uncontrolled xenotechnology is a threat by its very nature. Your data, Commander. Now. Jax leaned closer to her, his voice a whisper. We could deploy a data ghost, a corrupted file. Buy us some time. Rostova shook her head, her gaze fixed on the silent, monolithic shape of the anchorage. No, we will comply. But we are not leaving. She addressed the proctor directly. Transmitting our preliminary findings, now Proctor. However, I must log a formal objection. This object shows no signs of hostility. It is dormant. To approach it with warships is to risk provoking a reaction we cannot predict. Valerius offered a cold, thin smile. That is a risk we are prepared to take. Your compliance is noted, Commander. Move your vessel, or it will be moved for you. The transmission ended. Some silences are not empty. They are listening. Anaya's voice suddenly cut through the tension. Commander, I'm getting something from the sigil. It's not energy. It's a resonance cascade. A pattern. It's responding to our scans. On the engineering display, a complex waveform blossomed, a sequence of impossibly precise mathematical constants. It wasn't a signal meant to be heard. It was a signal meant to be understood. It was a question posed in the universal language of mathematics. Pathfinder analyzed it instantly. The pattern is a query, Commander. It appears to be a logical proof problem structured as a request for judgment. Jack stared at the display, bewildered. It's asking a riddle, while an Ascendancy fleet is pointing guns at it. Rostova, however, felt a shock of recognition. The historical fragments she had studied spoke of this, of gateways that asked for the measure of a soul, and archives that would only open for a worthy hand. This wasn't a password. It was an interview. It's testing us, Jax. All of us. It wants to know who we are. A law without a judge is only ink. The pressure in the room felt immense, the weight of 1,000 forgotten years settling on her shoulders. The anchorage was awake and it was waiting for an answer. The Ascendancy frigates began to move their engines, flaring, as they formed a closing perimeter around the stellograph and the artifact. They were boxing her and preparing to sever her connection to the object of her study. Valerius wanted control, the clean, simple authority of overwhelming force. He could not comprehend a power that asked questions instead of issuing commands. Rostova knew she had one chance, a fleeting window to respond before the ascendancy silenced her and the anchorage forever. The first word in any dialogue determines the last. She turned to her console, her fingers flying across the holographic interface. Pathfinder, isolate the core question of the proof. Filter out the mathematical framework. What is it asking? The AI processed the request for a silent humming moment. It presents a scenario, Commander. Two civilizations are in dispute over a resource-rich planet. Civilization A has a historical claim, but no present need. Civilization B has no historical claim, but a critical immediate need for survival. The query asks for the principle upon which a just resolution should be arbitrated. A test of ethics, a test of law. Jax shook his head. It's a trick. There's no right answer. Anaya countered from her station. Maybe that's the point. It's not about the answer, but the reasoning behind it. Rostova felt a strange clarity descend upon her. The anchorage wasn't a weapon platform waiting for an activation code. It was a repository of precedent, a judge. It didn't want a solution. It wanted a doctrine. The hum from the artifact grew louder, a clear, resonant tone that filled the bridge. It was impatient. A choice once offered cannot be refused. The ascendancy would say, the claim of civilization. A is paramount. Rostova mused, thinking aloud. Historical precedent is the foundation of their entire legal structure. Order above all else. Jax grunted. The Corsairs would say might makes right. Whoever is strong enough to take the planet deserves it. He wasn't wrong. The pirates who plagued these outer sectors operated on the simple principle of violent acquisition. Rostova looked at the monolithic shape on her screen. It had been built by her ancestors, but they were more alien to her than any species she had ever studied. What kind of justice did they value? She began to formulate her response not as a simple choice, but as a framework, a system of weighted priorities. Need she decided must be the primary metric when survival is at stake. But precedent could not be discarded, for without it, there is no law, only chaos. Her answer would be a compromise, a solution that served both survival and the rule of law. She would propose a trust where Civilization B is granted access to the resources under a mandate with a portion of their production tithed to Civilization A as acknowledgement of their claim. A solution that favored stewardship over ownership. A ledger that balances need against right. As she finalized the response packet, a proximity alert blared. Jax's head snapped toward the tactical display. Multiple contacts. Commander Small signatures, high velocity. They're not ascendancy. They burst from the shadow of a nearby moon, a swarm of lean predatory ships, their hulls scarred and mismatched. Corsair raiders. They've been waiting in the dark, watching us, Jax growled. They're making a play for the artifact, while the ascendancy is focused on us. The raiders ignored the stellograph entirely, their weapons spitting kinetic rounds at the nearest ascendancy frigate. Chaos erupted in the void. A conflict ignored is a battle already lost. Proctor Valerius's face appeared on her screen again, his composure shattered by a raw, burning fury. Commander Rostova, your presence has drawn this vermin. This is your fault. Withdraw immediately, or you will be fired upon as a co-conspirator. The Ascendancy cruisers, caught off guard, began to pivot their heavy turrets, slow to track the nimble Corsair ships. The pirates were weaving a deadly web using the larger ships as cover, creating a maelstrom of confusion and violence. Rostova watched the battle unfold, a cold knot tightening in her stomach. Her ship was caught in the crossfire. Send the response. Pathfinder! She ordered, her voice cutting through the rising cacophony of alarms. Now! The AI complied without a word. A tight beam of data containing her carefully constructed legal doctrine shot from the Stellagraph's main transmitter toward the silent, waiting anchorage. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. The battle raged on a chaotic dance of light and death. The Ascendancy frigate that had been targeted by the pirates buckled its flank, erupting in a silent, blossoming flower of fire and debris. The cost of hesitation is always paid in blood. Then the universe changed. The hum from the anchorage stopped. In its place came a profound, absolute silence that seemed to swallow the noise of the battle. A single point of light appeared on the sigil, a brilliant, piercing white that pulsed with impossible energy. The sleeping arrays of the 9-kilometer structure began to glow, traced in lines of pure, cold light. The entire Tartarus anomaly was suddenly illuminated by the awakening of the ancient machine. It was no longer a shadow. It was a beacon. A wave of energy, not destructive but declarative, washed over the system. On the Stellagraph's bridge, every console screen flickered and then stabilized, displaying a single clear message in a stark, ancient human script. Judgment acknowledged. Precedent set. Jurisdiction established. Outside, the Corsair ships suddenly lost power. Their engines died. Their weapon systems went dark. They drifted helpless and inert, caught in a net they could not see. The Ascendancy ships, too, found their systems unresponsive. They were not disabled, but locked. Their weapons were safe, their engines were idle, and they could not be brought back online. A power that does not need to destroy is a power that cannot be defeated. The voice that spoke came from every speaker on the bridge, a chorus of 1,000 voices speaking as one, yet with the clarity of a single entity. It was ancient, genderless, and resonated with an authority that dwarfed the proctor's angry demands. We are the anchorage. We are the ledger. The debt is recorded. It was not speaking to Rostova. It was making a statement to the cosmos. By the precedent of need and the doctrine of stewardship, this system is now a sanctuary. All who enter will be judged. All hostilities will cease. Proctor Valerius's face was a mask of disbelief and horror. He had come to contain a threat and had instead become a prisoner of a power he could not comprehend. The Corsair raiders who lived by the sword were now subject to a law they did not understand. Rostova felt a profound, trembling awe. She had not activated a weapon. She had woken a court with the power to enforce its own sentences. The scales of justice once balanced way worlds. Her tactical officer, Jax, slowly sank into his chair, his eyes wide. "What did you do, Commander?" he whispered. His usual bravado gone, replaced by a raw, unadulterated shock. Rostova looked at the anchorage, now glowing with a soft, internal luminescence. It felt alive, aware. She had offered it a principle, and it had accepted it as law. She had given it a conscience. I gave it an answer, she said, her own voice barely a whisper. I taught it a piece of who we are, or perhaps who we aspire to be. The anchorage's voice returned, this time directed solely at the Stellagraph. The other ships in the system received only silence. Interlocutor Rostova, your vessel is recognized. Your reasoning is sound. It has been entered into the primary ledger. A new symbol appeared on Rostova's command console, the sigil of the anchorage. It pulsed with a soft white light. It was a key, a grant of access. We have slept long. The galaxy has changed. The archives are incomplete. We require a teacher. Rostova stared at the symbol. She, a humble historian, was being asked to instruct a machine god from the dawn of time. The responsibility was crushing, terrifying, and exhilarating. The ascendancy was powerless. The Corsairs were neutralized. She held the key to the most significant discovery in human history. Her quiet mission of observation was over. A new mission, one she could never have imagined, had just begun. Her choices would not just be recorded in a log. They would become the law for a power that could silence fleets with a thought. It was the burden of a god placed in the hands of a mortal. Anaya's voice was filled with a scientist's wonder. "Commander, the energy readings from the anchorage are stable. It's operating at less than 1,000th of its potential output. It's idling." This was the relic's quietest state, its posture of peace. Jax finally found his voice again, a note of grim reality creeping back in. "That's great. But the Proctor isn't just going to sit there and accept this. And those pirates have friends. We're in the middle of a galactic storm, and we're holding the lightning rod." He was right. The immediate danger had been neutralized, but the long-term consequences were immeasurable. The ascendancy would not tolerate a power it couldn't control. Other factions would see the anchorage as the ultimate prize. Some victories are merely the prelude to a greater war. A new message appeared on Rostova's screen, this one text only from the anchorage. "A new dispute has been detected. Jurisdiction is uncertain. Your judgment is requested." Below the text was a live sensor feed from a system 50 light-years away. It showed a ring world, a magnificent ancient structure surrounded by the fleets of two warring factions. It was a conflict that had been raging for decades, costing billions of lives. The anchorage was showing her its next potential case. It was asking her to be its judge, its arbiter, its moral compass. Before she could process the enormity of the request, a priority signal from Pathfinder cut through. "Commander, I am detecting a subspace transmission originating from the lead Ascendancy cruiser, the Immutable Truth. It is a high-priority encrypted message directed toward the Ascendancy core worlds. It is a declaration of Exigent Threat Protocol Omega." Rostova felt a chill crawl up her spine. Protocol Omega was the call for a holy war, a crusade to eliminate a threat deemed existential to the Ascendancy's way of life. Valerius, trapped and humiliated, was calling for an armada. "The ink of the law is no match for the fire of fanaticism." "Can you jam it, Jax?" she asked, her mind racing. He shook his head grimly. "Not a chance. That's a quantum-entangled comm laser. It's instantaneous and unstoppable. The message is already sent. The choice had been made. The die was cast. In a few days, or perhaps a few weeks, the full might of the Ascendancy would descend upon the Tartarus anomaly, not to quarantine, but to annihilate. To erase the anchorage and the heresy it represented from the pages of history. Her peaceful sanctuary was about to become the epicenter of a war. Rostova looked from the tactical plot, showing the coming storm, to the query from the anchorage on her other screen, asking for her judgment on a distant war. She was being pulled in two directions, the immediate need for survival versus the immense responsibility of her new role. She had woken a giant, and now she had to teach it to walk a righteous path while dodging the spears of those who feared it. A legacy is not what you find. It is what you build. A private citizen on a remote agricultural world watched a pirated feed of the events in Tartarus. The image was grainy, the audio distorted, but the truth of it was unmistakable. A single ancient object had pacified an Ascendancy fleet and a pack of Corsair killers without firing a shot. He looked at his children sleeping peacefully in the other room. For the first time in a long time, he felt a flicker of something he had thought long dead. It was the faint, fragile glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, the old stories were true. The voice of the anchorage returned a calm, implacable presence in the storm of her thoughts. The Proctor Valerius has issued a call for violence. His actions are now subject to the ledger. His intent is recorded. A new line of script appeared on Rostova's console, glowing a soft, ominous red beneath the sigil of the anchorage. It was a new entry, a debt. Action call for unjust war. Status pending judgment. The machine was learning. It understood the Proctor's transmission not as a simple message but as a crime. It was waiting for her, the judge, to pass sentence. The first duty of the law is to protect itself. She had to make a choice. Ignore the Proctor's transgression and prepare for the coming war, or deliver a judgment here and now and demonstrate the true nature of the anchorage's power to the entire galaxy. To act was to escalate beyond a point of no return. To hesitate was to show weakness, to invite aggression. She looked at Jax, then at Anaya. Their faces reflected her own turmoil. They were explorers, scientists. They were not warriors or judges, yet the mantle had been placed upon them. Pathfinder spoke its calm, logical voice, a steady anchor in the churning sea of uncertainty. Commander probability analysis suggests that any direct punitive action against the Proctor will increase the resolve of the incoming Ascendancy fleet by 87%. However, inaction will be interpreted as a limitation of the anchorage's capabilities, encouraging more aggressive tactics from the enemy. The AI presented the cold, hard calculus of her dilemma. There was no safe path. Every choice carried a terrible price. Choose the debt you are willing to pay. Rostova took a deep breath, the sterile, recycled air of the bridge filling her lungs. She looked at the glowing sigil on her console, the key to a power that could reshape civilization. It did not want a commander. It wanted a conscience. It taught by numbers and remembered by ledgers, never by collars or chains. That was the core of its being, the principle she had to uphold. She would not be a tyrant, even in the name of peace. She would be a teacher. Her first lesson would be about consequence. Anchorage, she said, her voice clear and firm, resonating with an authority she did not know she possessed. The Proctor has acted out of fear, not malice. His doctrine is rigid, but it is not inherently evil. We will not answer his call for violence with more violence. She leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the red pending entry. But an action has been taken. A debt has been incurred. It must be logged. It must be counted. The machine waited its silence, a form of acceptance, of patient inquiry. It was asking her what the price should be. What is the cost of a threat? The sentence is not death, she declared. The sentence is education. A ripple of confusion went through the bridge. Jax frowned. Education. Rostova nodded, a plan forming in her mind, a gambit that was not about weapons or shields but about ideas. The Proctor and his fleet are a danger because they are ignorant. They fear what they do not understand. So we will teach them. She turned to the console, addressing the anchorage directly. Open a channel to the immutable truth, a private one. The Proctor is to be given a choice. He can remain here, his fleet disabled, and await a war he has started. Or he can accept a lesson. The anchorage processed her command. Specify the nature of the lesson. Rostova smiled, a thin, grim line. Access your archives, the historical ones. Show him the cost of the last great schism. Show him the wars of the first ancestors, the price of dogma, the millions of lives lost to fear and intolerance. Make him bear witness to the history he is so desperate to repeat. She was turning the archive into a classroom, and the sentence was a mandatory history lesson. A mirror held up to the face of folly. A secure channel snapped open to the bridge of the immutable truth. Proctor Valerius's face appeared contorted with rage. "What is this? What trickery are you playing at?" "Heretic." Rostova's voice was calm, a stark contrast to his fury. "This is not a trick, Proctor. It is a choice. You have called for a war against a power you do not comprehend. You are invited to comprehend it. The Anchorage will share a portion of its historical archives with you. You will see the precedents upon which this new law is founded." Valerius laughed, a harsh barking sound. "You think to sway me with your corrupted histories, your lies." "It is not a request," Rostova said, her voice turning to steel. "It is the sentence. You will either learn, or you will remain here as a monument to your own ignorance when your armada arrives." She paused, letting the weight of the ultimatum sink in. "The choice is yours, Proctor. The ledger is waiting." She cut the connection, leaving him alone with his decision. The silence on her own bridge was thick with unspoken questions. Anaya looked at her, a glimmer of admiration in her eyes. Jack simply shook his head, a slow, grudging respect dawning on his face. She had not drawn a sword. She had opened a book. The wait was agonizing. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The Ascendancy fleet remained silent, locked in the Anchorage's gentle but unbreakable grip. The Corsairs drifted their crews likely in a state of panic and confusion. The entire system held its breath, waiting for the Proctor's decision. The fate of Tartarus, and perhaps the galaxy, rested on whether a man of rigid dogma could be forced to learn. Finally, the immutable truth sent a single coded acknowledgement. It was a signal of compliance. Valerius had chosen the lesson. Instantly, a tight beam of pure data lanced from the Anchorage to the Ascendancy flagship. It was not a weapon, but a torrent of information, a flood of memories from a forgotten age. Rostova could only imagine what the Proctor was seeing: battles that scarred planets, ideologies that consumed stars, the terrible echoing silence of extinction. The Anchorage was not merely showing him facts, it was making him experience the weight of them. The truth once seen cannot be unseen. A change began to occur across the Ascendancy fleet. The ships remained locked, but their internal energy signatures shifted. Non-essential systems were powered down. The posture of the fleet changed from aggressive readiness to a state of quiet, passive reception. They were not just receiving data, they were connecting to it, processing it, being changed by it. Rostova realized the Anchorage's lesson was not confined to the Proctor. It was being shared with his entire command structure. It was a re-education on a fleet-wide scale. The Anchorage spoke again, its voice a soft hum in the back of her mind. The first lesson is underway. The debt is being paid. Jurisdiction is reinforced. The red pending entry on her console shifted to a cool, stable blue. The crisis had been averted for now. The immediate threat of the Proctor's fleet had been transformed from a weapon into a classroom. But the larger threat the Armada Valerius had summoned was still coming. This small victory had only bought her a little time. Time to prepare. Time to teach the Anchorage more about the universe it had awoken to. Time to decide what kind of guardian it would become. A power unguided is merely a storm. Her gaze shifted back to the other query, the image of the distant ring world torn by war. That conflict had not paused. Lives were still being lost with every passing moment. The Anchorage had shown it could enforce peace in its immediate vicinity. But could it project that peace across the stars? Could it be a judge for the entire galaxy? The question was overwhelming. She was one person. How could she possibly guide such a power? How could she know the right thing to do when worlds hung in the balance? Pathfinder interrupted her spiraling thoughts, its synthesized voice cutting through the silence. "Commander, the Corsair vessels are hailing us. Their leader, a captain named Kalen, wishes to speak with you." Jack straightened in his chair. "Let me take it, Commander. I speak their language." Rostova nodded, ceding the comms panel to her tactical officer. This was another test, another challenge. The pirates were predators, but they were also pragmatists. They had witnessed a power that had neutralized them effortlessly. They would be seeking to understand it, to find a way to either exploit it or appease it. Jax's face hardened as he listened to the Corsair captain's transmission. After a few moments of terse exchange, he turned to Rostova. "He's offering a deal. He says his people value strength above all else. He sees the anchorage as the new apex power in this sector. He wants to serve it." Rostova was taken aback. Serve it. How Jax's expression was grim. He's offering his fleet as enforcers. He's proposing to be the sword of the anchorage to carry out its judgments on those who refuse to comply. He's asking for a collar commander. The irony was staggering. The very thing the anchorage's doctrine seemed to abhor, coercion, servitude, was being offered freely by those who had only ever known the rule of the strong. To accept would give her an armed force, a tool to protect the sanctuary. But it would come at the cost of the very principles she was trying to establish. It would corrupt the foundation of her new law before the first stone was even fully set. The shortest path is often a trap. She looked at the image of the anchorage on the main screen, its clean, glowing lines, a symbol of a different way, a better way. It remembered by ledgers, not by collars. Her path was clear. She stepped forward, taking control of the comms channel. "This is Commander Rostova of the Stellograph," she broadcast to the Corsair fleet. "The anchorage does not require servants. It does not seek enforcers. It offers only one thing, a law that is equal for all." She paused, letting her words sink into the silence. "If you wish to remain in this system, you will abide by that law. If you wish to serve the cause of justice, then you will carry that principle with you when you leave. There is no other path." She was offering them citizenship in her new tiny kingdom of reason. She was offering them a chance to be more than they were. It is not enough to defeat an enemy. You must offer them a better peace. The Corsair captain, Kalen, remained silent on the comm for a long charged moment. His face, a roadmap of scars and cynical amusement, was unreadable. On the bridge of the Stellograph, Jax tensed his hand, hovering over the tactical console, expecting a torrent of mockery or a renewed threat. Instead, the pirate's lips curled into a slow, predatory grin. "No collars," he repeated as if tasting the words. "Just a law. That's a new one." He leaned back in his command chair, the leather creaking in protest. "All right, Commander. We'll play your game. For now. We will stay, and we will watch." The channel closed, leaving a stunned silence in its wake. Jax let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He agreed. Just like that, Anaya answered from her station, her eyes still on her sensor readings. It's logical. From his perspective, this is the safest place in the sector. And he gets to observe a power that defeated an ascendancy fleet without lifting a finger. Knowledge is a weapon, too. Rostova nodded, a sliver of relief cutting through the immense pressure. She had offered a principle, and it had been accepted by a man who had lived his life by its opposite. It was a fragile beginning, a single seed of reason planted in the hard soil of chaos. A law unsupported by consent is merely a threat. Her attention was drawn back to the proctor. The data stream to the immutable truth continued, a silent, relentless river of information. The ship's energy signature was still in a passive state, but Rostova could detect faint rhythmic fluctuations from its medical bay. The lesson was not a gentle one. It was psychic surgery, a forced re-examination of a lifetime of certainty. She wondered what Valerius was feeling, seeing the ghosts of his ideology's past failures. Was it anger, denial, or the first terrifying crack in the foundation of his faith? Truth does not negotiate. It simply is. Pathfinder's calm voice provided a necessary dose of reality. Commander, the Corsair fleet is repositioning. They are taking up a loose patrol pattern at the edge of the anomaly, consistent with a defensive screen. Jax's eyes widened slightly. They're not just staying. They're guarding the border. Kalen was a creature of action. He had interpreted abiding by the law as defending the jurisdiction. He was not her sword, but he had of his own volition become a shield. The Ascendancy Armada is still inbound. Pathfinder continued its tone unchanging. Current projections estimate arrival in 42 standard hours. Their numbers are confirmed: 1 dreadnought, 6 battlecruisers, and over 50 support vessels. The sheer scale of the force was staggering. A fleet designed to pacify entire sectors, all converging on her single tiny survey ship and its ancient silent partner. 42 hours, Rostova whispered. It felt like a death sentence. She looked again at the query on her screen, the silent plea from the war-torn ring world. She had bought a temporary peace here in Tartarus, but at what cost? While she focused on her own survival, a civilization was bleeding to death 50 light-years away. A judge who cannot act is merely a witness. She could not afford to be just a witness. Pathfinder analyzed the anchorage's long-range capabilities. It has demonstrated control over this system, but the ring world query implies it can perceive events at a distance. Can it act at a distance? The AI's avatar pulsed, processing the question. The mechanism is unclear. Commander, it does not appear to utilize conventional wormhole or translation technology. The data suggests a form of quantum resonance. It does not send matter or energy. It seems to send principles. It can project a state, a rule into a distant system. Anaya looked up from her console, her face alight with scientific awe. It's a reality engine. It doesn't break the laws of physics, it publishes new ones. Rostova's mind seized on the concept. She couldn't send ships. She couldn't fire a weapon, but she could send a principle. She could send the truth. The Ringworld War had raged for so long because both sides were fueled by propaganda, by narratives of righteous anger and historical grievance. The true cost, the sheer brutal arithmetic of their conflict, was buried under layers of ideology. She would unearth it. A mirror shows no mercy. It only shows what is there. Anchorage, she commanded, her voice ringing with newfound purpose. The dispute in the Loro system. The ring world. We will not render a judgment from afar. We will provide a tool for them to find their own. The light on the sigil on her console pulsed in acknowledgement. Project a ledger into that system, a public one. You will record every act of aggression from both sides in real time. Every missile fired its resource cost. Every life lost their name and affiliation. Every meter of the ring world damaged. You will count the cost. And you will broadcast that ledger, that running undeniable tally of their self-destruction on all public channels in that system. She was not choosing a side. She was holding them accountable to their own actions. The anchorage, the great arbiter, would serve as the galaxy's most impartial accountant. Command acknowledged. The chorus of voices resonated through the bridge. The ledger of sorrows will be scribed. A deep, resonant hum emanated from the ancient structure outside. Energy levels rose not to a battle-ready state, but to the focused, intense pitch of a massive calculation being performed. The arrays on its hull glowed brighter, shifting their geometric patterns into a new, impossibly complex configuration. It was aiming its consciousness across the stars. A debt once counted must be repaid. Jax watched the energy readings, his expression a mixture of awe and apprehension. "You're sending them a bill for their own war." Rostova nodded. "A war can only be sustained if the population believes the cost is worth it. We're going to show them the true cost without the filters of patriotism or propaganda." It was a gambit on a scale she could barely comprehend, a roll of the dice on the fundamental nature of intelligent life. She was betting that when faced with the unvarnished mathematical truth of their folly, people would choose peace. Aboard a medical frigate in the Loros system, a surgeon named Ilara worked tirelessly to save a young soldier, his body shattered by shrapnel. The war had been her entire life, a constant grinding reality. Suddenly, the main screen in the operating theater flickered. It was replaced by a stark black screen with glowing amber text. "Ledger of Sorrows," it read. Cycle 3, 451 of the conflict. Below it, lines of text began to scroll. 1. Bastion class kinetic round. Cost 1. 200 credits. 45 kg of refined metals, fired by Alliance cruiser Vindicator. A moment later, a new line appeared. 1 human life. Name Joran Kell. Age 19. Affiliation Republic Infantry. That was the boy on her table. His heart monitor flatlined. The machine had recorded his death the instant it happened. Ilara stared at the screen, her bloody hands frozen in place, the true cold equation of her work displayed for all to see. The effect in the Loro system was not immediate. At first there was confusion, then outrage. Both the Alliance and the Republic denounced the Ledger of Sorrows as a psychological warfare tactic from the other side. They tried to jam the signal, to block the broadcast. But it was unstoppable. It appeared on every public screen, every private datapad, every ship's bridge. It was a ghost in their machine, a constant, undeniable witness. The truth is the most patient of weapons. Within hours, the tenor of the conflict began to change. A missile salvo, once a triumphant act of martial prowess, was now seen as a debit of millions of credits, a loss of resources their strained economies could not afford. A platoon of soldiers, once faceless heroes, were now listed by name as they fell, their ages and hometowns scrolling across the screens of their families. The glorious narrative of war was being dismantled line by the cold, impartial mathematics of the ledger. Public support for the war, once a raging fire, began to flicker and dim. Back in Tartarus, Rostova watched the data stream from Loros with a sense of profound, terrifying wonder. It was working. The rate of weapons fire was decreasing. Ship movements were becoming more hesitant. She had thrown a pebble of truth into a pond of war, and the ripples were turning into waves. But her success had a price. The energy expenditure from the anchorage was significant. The projection was a strain even for a machine of its power. "Its reserves are down by 4%, Anaya reported, her voice tight with concern. "It can't maintain this indefinitely, especially not if it needs to defend itself against the Armada." The brightest candle burns the fastest. The countdown continued. 30 hours. Pathfinder delivered its latest report. The Ascendancy Armada has increased its velocity. They have entered the outer marker of the Tartarus sector. They are no longer proceeding with caution. They are on an attack vector. Jax's knuckles were white where he gripped his console. "They're not coming to talk." Rostova's gaze went to the immutable truth. The data stream had ceased. The lesson was over. Proctor Valerius's ship was silent, its energy signature still passive, but different. It felt like a coiled spring, Anchorage Rostova asked, her voice low. What is the proctor's state? The subject has processed the archives, the voice replied. His certainty has been replaced by conflict. The debt is paid, but the ledger of his conscience is now unbalanced. Valerius was no longer a zealot. He was a man broken by truth, forced to confront the abyss between his beliefs and reality. He was now the most unpredictable element in a system full of them. A mind forced open can never be closed again. 20 hours. The Corsair captain, Kalen, hailed her. His usual smirk was gone, replaced by a grim professionalism. Commander, my long-range scouts have tagged the lead elements of the Ascendancy fleet. They're deploying drone screens and preparing for a full-spectrum assault. They think your big friend here is a fortress. They intend to level it. He paused. My people didn't sign up for a suicide run. What are your orders? It was a question she had been dreading. She had no right to command him, no right to ask him to die for her. Your agreement was to abide by the law of this sanctuary, Captain Rostova said carefully. That law does not require you to fight. Your safety is your own priority. You are free to leave. Kalen stared at her for a moment, then laughed a short, sharp bark. Leave, Commander. You've got a strange way of inspiring loyalty. We're not leaving. We're just pirates, not cowards. But we need a plan that doesn't involve being the first speed bump for a dreadnought. His strange, pragmatic code of honor was a surprising comfort. He who fights for a principle is more dangerous than he who fights for gold. A plan. She needed a plan that wasn't a fight. The anchorage would not raise shields or fire weapons in the conventional sense. Its power was in judgment, in control, in the application of law. She looked at the Ascendancy fleet, a force of pure dogmatic order. How do you defeat an enemy whose greatest strength is its unshakable unity? You break it. You introduce a variable they cannot compute. You introduce doubt. Her eyes fell once more upon the silent form of the immutable truth. Valerius was not a weapon. He was a question. 10 hours. The Ascendancy Armada was a swarm of angry, glowing icons on the tactical display. They were close enough now to jam all outbound communication. The sanctuary was isolated. Rostova, her crew, the chastened proctor, and a small band of pirates were alone against a force that could crack planets. They're hailing us. Jax announced, his voice flat. On the main screen, the face of a new man appeared. He was older than Valerius, his face a granite mask of absolute authority, his uniform adorned with the highest honors. This was Grand Proctor Kincaid. Unidentified entity. Kincaid's voice boomed, laced with cold, metallic fury. You have illegally detained an Ascendancy fleet and corrupted its commander. You are a Class 1 existential threat. Surrender your vessel, your crew, and the heretical structure you control, or you will be erased. There was no room for negotiation in his tone. This was the voice of dogma, a force that saw all things in black and white. To a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Rostova stood tall, the weight of her decision settling upon her. Grand Proctor Kincaid, she replied, her voice steady and clear, broadcast on an open channel for all to hear. My name is Commander Eva Rostova of the research vessel Stellograph. This entity, the anchorage, is not a weapon, and this system is not a fortress. It is a court. We have not detained your fleet. We have offered it an education. We will not surrender, but we will not fight. Kincaid's lip curled in a sneer. Then you will die. The channel cut. The final hour. The Ascendancy fleet spread into a massive, crescent-shaped attack formation. Weapon ports opened. Energy levels surged. The void crackled with the imminent promise of violence. Anaya's hands flew across her console, monitoring the anchorage's energy reserves. The projection to the Loro system was still active, a constant drain on its power. "Commander," she said, her voice strained. "If we're going to do something, it has to be now." Rostova looked at Jax, who simply nodded, his face set in a grim mask of resolve. He was with her to the end. Pathfinder Rostova said, her heart pounding against her ribs. "Open a private channel to the immutable truth. To Proctor Valerius." "Channel open, Commander." She took a breath. "Proctor, you have seen the truth of the anchorage. You have seen the history of what happens when men like Kincaid are allowed to act without question. The choice is now yours. You can be a footnote in his war, or you can be the first sentence in a new chapter of law. You can be a prisoner of your old doctrine, or a defender of a new one. A choice is a mirror of the soul." She ended the transmission. She had given him the choice. Now all she could do was wait. The Ascendancy fleet began its final advance. The lead cruisers fired their first salvo not at the anchorage, but at the Corsair ships, intending to sweep aside the gnats before striking the giant. Kalen's voice crackled over the comm. "Well, it's been an interesting ride, Commander." His ships scattered, dodging and weaving their smaller frames, making them difficult targets, but they were hopelessly outgunned. Then a new vector appeared on the tactical map. A single powerful energy signature moving at high speed. It was the immutable truth. Valerius's cruiser surged forward, its engines burning at maximum output. It wasn't fleeing. It was positioning itself directly between the advancing armada and the outmatched Corsair fleet. It placed itself in the path of the storm. A shield is only as strong as the will that holds it. Grand Proctor Kincaid's furious voice erupted over the fleet-wide channel. "Immutable truth, what is the meaning of this? Stand down your vessel and return to formation immediately." "That is a direct order." Valerius's voice, calm and clear, and utterly transformed, replied for all to hear. "I cannot, Grand Proctor. My duty is not to a man, but to the truth, and you are leading us into the same darkness that consumed our ancestors." With a keystroke, Valerius did not fire a weapon. He broadcast the anchorage's lesson, the entire unfiltered archive of the Ascendancy's historical failures, of its brutal dogmatic wars, to every ship in Kincaid's armada. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic for the armada's unity. Consoles on 100 bridges lit up with the ghosts of the past. Captains and crews who had been raised on a diet of glorious propaganda were suddenly force-fed a banquet of their civilization's most horrific truths. Doubt, the most corrosive of acids, began to eat away at the foundations of their certainty. Ships began to hesitate. The perfect unified crescent of the attack formation wavered. An army that no longer believes in its cause is just a mob. "Destroy that ship," Kincaid screamed, his composure shattered by the act of supreme ideological betrayal. "Fire on the immutable truth, fire." Now the dreadnought, the Iron, Veritas, its crew still loyal to the Grand Proctor, obeyed. Its primary energy cannon, a weapon capable of searing continents, began to charge. The light of a captive star grew in its maw. But the anchorage had been waiting. It had seen the intent. It had recorded the order. Judgment rendered, its voice echoed not with anger, but with the profound finality of a closing door. No energy beam lanced out. No missile was fired. Instead, a zone of absolute stillness expanded from the anchorage, enveloping the Iron Veritas in a shimmering, translucent bubble. Inside the bubble, time and physics seemed to bend. The dreadnought's cannon did not explode. It simply failed to fire. Its systems went inert. Its engines died. It was becalmed in a sea of space-time. It could not navigate a perfect, harmless prison. A law that can disarm is greater than a law that can destroy. The sight of their flagship, the embodiment of their power, rendered utterly helpless without a single shot being fired, broke the Armada's will. It was not a defeat. It was a lesson on an unimaginable scale. One by one, the ships of the Ascendancy fleet powered down their weapons. The attack was over. Valerius's cruiser, the Immutable Truth, had taken minor damage from the initial crossfire, its hull scorched, but it was alive. The Corsairs, who had been seconds from annihilation, were alive. The sanctuary was safe. In the quiet aftermath, Rostova felt the tension drain from her, leaving a profound exhaustion in its wake. She had faced down an armada and won not with firepower, but with an idea. On her main console, a new public broadcast protocol was being established, negotiated between a repentant Valerius and a grudgingly respectful Kalin. They were drafting the Tartarus Precedent, a document declaring the anchorage a neutral ground for arbitration, its judgments to be respected, its interlocutor to be protected. Her gambit had become law. Anaya reported that the energy drain from the anchorage had stabilized. The projection to the Loro system remained active, but the conflict there had all but ceased. Faced with the undeniable ledger of their losses, both sides had called for a ceasefire and had formally petitioned the anchorage to mediate their dispute. Jax gave a low whistle from the tactical station. The Corsairs are helping the Immutable Truth with field repairs. I don't think I'll ever get used to this. Every sensor anchor on the bridge told a story of a new reality, the low hum of the now peaceful sanctuary, the sight of pirate and navy ships working together, the faint, clean smell of victory without bloodshed. On Rostova's command console, a primary ledger entry blinked with a soft, steady green light. Case 001 Ascendancy Fleet vs. Tartarus Sanctuary. Status resolved. Precedent set. She was no longer just a historian, a reader of stories written by others. She was now a part of the story, a scribe writing a new chapter of galactic law, with a partner made of time and starlight. Her work was not to command fleets or conquer worlds, but to hold up a mirror to count the cost, and to remind a galaxy that had forgotten that the weight of a single truthful word could be greater than that of 1,000 warships. It was a terrifying, beautiful, and sacred duty. The ledger is open. The counting has begun.